Caddis Maximus here, this time with a review of the Napa Professional. I guess they're also calling these Carlyle. Even though they don't have Carlyle printing on them, it appears that Napa is just going to brand all of their tools as Carlyle. All of their professional or higher grade stuff, because online these are now listed as the Carlyle. This is the 13-piece 610207 DeepWell 6-point 3/8 inch drive impact socket set. So I did a review a little while ago of the, I would say, DeepWell or more midwell impact swivel sockets, and these were really expensive. They're $138 for a 10-piece set, normal price, and then you get, I was able to use a 20% AAA discount on them, but they were still pretty expensive. What is interesting about this 13-piece DeepWell 3/8 inch set is its normal price is $52. They have they don't have the AAA sale, but they have like a back to school sale for 10% off. So these can be ordered for $47, which is actually a totally reasonable price for some decent quality Taiwanese made metric impact sockets. What's nice is it is a 13-piece, so you actually get every size from 7 millimeter up through 19. So there would be I would consider a more complete or a couple more complete sets, and that would be the 16 or 18-piece sets. And all those do is sometimes they'll include a 6 millimeter, and many times they'll include a 20, 21, 22, and maybe a 23 and a 24. But for $50, this is actually a pretty decent impact socket set. Probably not a huge difference, say, over from Harbor Freight's impact socket set, except for you once again are getting a 13-piece set, so it's really nice to have a complete set. There are some criticisms, however, of this socket set. One is the way that they've turned down all these smaller sockets. What they've done here is they've chosen like a minimum bar or billet size, and so everything that's below that billet size, in this case anything that's smaller than 12 millimeter, uses the same bar stock, and then they just broach it to a smaller size, and then they machine down the tip. I wish they would have machined down near towards the bottom, and that would have given you better access when you're using these smaller sizes. Obviously, in many situations where you might be using a 7 millimeter socket, this big, you're going to need a DeepWell, but this little narrow point is just real short, and so you're going to get blocked by the body of this socket. So that is one disappointment, but they do properly flute them, and they do flute the drive end, which is a positive. But on the negative side, they are a little bit cheaper. What we can see here is on the drive side, it hasn't been chamfered. We're even on their more expensive swivel impacts they did, and then of course on this Mastercraft Pro. The other thing I was going to mention is we can see that on their more expensive ones it is through drilled, and then it has the undercut groove, and that's an older and actually pretty rarely used, except for on large socket, form of retaining impact sockets. The Mastercraft Pro is the same way. This one only has a single hole and does not have the undercut, so they saved a little bit of money on some machine work there. But once again, these are normal height, so these are definitely taller than those quote-unquote DeepWell. And Napa should not have listed these as DeepWell swivels. They should have listed them as midwells, because that's just a huge old difference for two sockets that are both labeled DeepWell. I mean, come on now. They are a pretty standard height. They're actually just a touch taller than the Mastercraft. One thing I was going to mention is that the broaching on the drive side is actually pretty tight on these, and I can put it on the air ratchet here. This is a new socket. Come on now, focus for me. And there's actually very little wobble there, so I was pretty happy with that. And about that through hole undercutting, one, it makes it easier to actually find a hole and get it aligned with whatever detent mechanism you're using. The through hole design they use is, for impact wrenches and air ratchets that have this type of retention where you have this little pin that you have to press. The real undercut, though, is used for a different type of system. This is not the proper pin, but there's actually a pin that goes through the socket. Why is this not cooperating? That goes all the way through the socket, and of course the anvils that are compatible just have a through hole drilled in them. And then you use a rubber band that goes into that groove, or in the case of an impact, it's like a big O-ring, and that actually provides positive retention. You don't really see it much in like service environments because it's too much hassle and you end up losing those little parts. But in manufacturing and assembly, you see it a lot more because in those type of environments, usually it's one socket that just stays on the tool until either the socket wears out or the tool wears out. So in that situation, you use this type of retention system, and then you just don't ever have to worry about it. So on a final note, in all intents and purposes, this is actually, surprisingly enough, a much more competitively priced impact socket set from Napa. And I did want to mention that they do both laser etch as well as roll stamp, so I do appreciate that nice touch. Really, a lot of manufacturers are going cheap, relying entirely on laser etching, and it is frustrating. It just ends up disappearing in no time. Physically stamped markings have to be physically ground down to disappear. So anyway, it's really, if you're not so into the Harbor Freight sockets, this is actually a pretty nice set, and it kind of shows one of the least nice things about Napa versus the other auto parts stores is that they have things like this. When they say professional, at least they somewhat attempt to, and in this case, giving you a complete set with no missing sizes. I just don't know why these sockets are really, they just must sell so few of them that they just have to charge a huge markup on them. And maybe they could have included a socket strip instead of one of these plastic trays that inevitably breaks apart. Anyway, I really appreciate everybody watching and subscribing. And if you haven't subscribed, please do. Until next time, Catus Maximus out.